Hey, this is Stuart back with the 208 Garage. Today we're working on the 2014 Yaris. It's really not that exciting. Most of you are probably actually looking forward to, just around the corner, the 2013 Chevy Silverado 1500 with a 5.3 liter. But today we're working on this car right here. It's really not the most exciting things, but it needs work done, so I figured I'd share my advice and my knowledge with you guys. Today we're going to be working on actually the rear brakes. Just as a reminder though, I'm not a professional shop, I'm a DIY. So today on the back end of this Yaris, we are going to be installing the PowerStop brake shoes. I went with these brakes. They were about 20 bucks on Amazon, these shoes. I've already pulled off the brake drum and looked at the shoes. The shoes were a little bit closer to the spec than I'd like. They're about 1.5 millimeters thick. They say you should really replace them at 1 millimeter thick. At this point, I'd rather just do it and know that I'm good for a while longer. I went with these particular brake shoes. People claim they're better than the OEMs they come with, but we'll see. We'll run them and try them for a while and see how they go, and I'll give a review to make sure that they're running well. I'll probably pull them off in a couple months just to make sure they're wearing evenly. So let's get into it. I'm going to pull off the tire and pull off the brake drum, and we'll go from there. Okay, now that we've got the wheel off, we're to the part where we're going to take off the drum. I already know that this drum is stuck on there pretty well, but what you normally do is you take a hammer and you hit in between the studs. You don't want to hit out too far or on the top because you can deform the drum if you're planning to reuse it again. So if those don't work, if you can't get it to wiggle loose, there are M8 bolts that you can buy just from your local hardware store, and they actually thread into these two holes. It'll back the drum off of the shoes. If for whatever reason it starts to flex and it doesn't break loose, then you have to go through the back and do the auto tensioner. Once we get the brake drum off, I will show you how to do that. And another important thing, your brake drum you should be able to move at this point. If it's not, you got to make sure that your parking brake is not on, your hand brake. That is a major thing that can cause an issue. So I'll get that off and we'll go from there. So it's important to note right now, if you look at this drum, you can see the health of the drum just based on this thickness of this metal out here on the outside edges. And if you look on the inside, there's not ridges that your fingernail will catch on. Like there's some dust and that sort of stuff, but it's nothing to be concerned about. If for whatever reason there is a huge rivet or a groove inside your brake drum or anything like that, then you should be concerned and you'd want to replace these drums at that point. But because mine looks good at this point, I'm not worried about that, so we'll clean that up in a bit. But now we're to where you can see all the brake drum parts, and you can see up here we have our cylinder that pushes the actual brake shoes apart. So you want to, whenever you're checking the health of this, you want to make sure that there's no fluid of any sort inside of here. You'd see a lot of the brake dust itself kind of clumping together. So at this point what we're going to do is, so these little washers on springs, we're going to push those in and twist them, and they'll pop off, and those will hold the shoes in. And then we've got a spring across the top here with the auto adjuster, which I'll show you that up close when we pull it off. And then there's a spring down here on the bottom that hold the shoes together. Something else to note of importance at this point, if as soon as you get the brake drum off or you start hitting on the brake drum, it's important I take an old garbage lid, just a plastic lid, and I stick it underneath to collect all the dust that could possibly come out, because it kind of gets to be a little bit messy. Everything that we're going to clean within here is going to be with brake clean, which evaporates. But let's get this pulled apart. Okay, it's important to notice at this point the adjustment of this auto adjusting. We want to make sure that we put it pretty close. We want to screw in just a little bit, not too much, for when we reinstall. So this is the auto adjuster. So if for whatever reason your brake shoes have worn so far into your brake drums, there's a little rubber gasket that's right underneath your cylinder that pushes out, and you can pull off the plug on the back side, and you just take a little screwdriver and you'll literally just twist it closed, and it brings the brake shoes in. As well, at this point there's this brake shoe here that is still attached to the parking brake, so we need I use a set of vice grips and I lock onto it, push the spring back a little bit. You can see the spring here. We're going to push that back a little bit, loosen it up, and then we're going to slide it off. Also at this point, you'll see me, I will go through and I will be cleaning up all of this. You use brake cleaner and just a wire brush, and you want to clean up all of this to try to get as much of the dust off as you possibly can. Also at the same time, I will be cleaning up this hub, just because that's kind of where it sticks on it. So we want to try to clean up as much of this rust, especially on the hub where it sits, to try to get it so it slides a little better than it currently does. So let's go for it. Okay, so one spring that I didn't mention is there's one that was sitting in the back that is attached to this spring that is part of the auto adjust system. So you just literally take that off and stick it on your new brake pad or your new brake shoe. Keep on mixing up those two things. So at this point, we need to reattach our brake shoe that is there for our handbrake. So at this point, we need to put some brake parts lubricant onto, there's three parts. There's 1, 2, 3 on each side. 1, 2, 3. We just need to put a little bit, so we need to make sure we kind of stir this up a little bit. And then we're just going to put a little bit on each one of those parts. We don't want to go too big because it is a lubricant. We're not looking to lubricate our brakes. We're just lubricating the shoes so they slide better on those pivot points. We want to make sure we do that right after we've cleaned it. So now all those parts are lubricated. Now we are going to take our shoes. This one we've already attached the brake to. And we're going to stick it up in place. And then we're going to take the little nail that we've got that goes through onto the back side. We're going to stick it through. And then we're going to stick our shoe on it. And then we're going to put our spring on. And then we're going to put the little washer on the top of it, which is a 1/4 turn washer that locks it in place. I always have to do it with vice grips or channel locks. It's definitely not the easiest. So now that's locked in place. Sweet. So now it's easiest to take our auto adjuster, make sure that we've screwed it in a little bit to make up for the depth of the new shoes. But we want to take it and attach to the one shoe before we put the other shoe on. So if we slide that in, there's little grooves. I'll show you on this on the old shoe. So on the old shoe, there's these grooves right here. The auto adjuster has little pieces. If you can see right in here, we've got our spot right here that those sit in. So we're going to slide that in, and then we're going to attach the spring on this side through. There's a little groove on this outside edge that we're going to attach that spring to before we stick the other side on. So we're going to take the other side and we're going to kind of line up that auto adjuster so it's just kind of in the right place. We're not actually going to attach the spring yet because we're going to do the spring in the washer that locks it in into place first before we get too carried away. That's locked in. So now we need to attach this auto adjusting spring across the top. We need to slide it across into that groove on the far side. So I'm going to take my vice grips. I'm going to lock them in on top of that spring. I've got about a 1/2 inch from the top of the loop to where my vice grips are going to attach, and then I'm going to just pull on it while pushing on this brake shoe to kind of hold it in place, and it's going to lock into place right there. Now onto the last spring. On the very bottom of your shoes there's a spot for both sides to hook in. There's a little metal bar. We want to go behind the metal bar. So this one is easiest with a pick. So we're going to just grab the other side of it, keep it behind that metal bar, and then we're going to pull it and get it locked in onto this other one. Just like that. So that's locked in. We want to try to make sure that this is evenly spaced across there. Everything's looking good. So at this point we're going to clean off our drum, and then we're going to clean off all of our surfaces that the brake drum touches. So the shoes, we're just going to do one last pass over with some brake cleaner. Having any sort of grease on from your hands on either the brake drum or the brake shoes is very bad. So now at this point we're going to take the brake drum and we're going to fit it over the top of it, over our brake shoes. And so what we're going to do is we're going to slide it in and see judgment of whether or not that's too loose or not. So there is a little bit of where I can feel where the shoes are touching the brake drum a little bit. We don't want excessive. We just want just a little bit, because the auto adjuster, as you press your brake pedal as you're driving down the road, it will eventually expand out to meet where's the optimal position, and that's the cool part about the auto adjusters. So that's actually in a really good spot. If not, we'd have to pull the drum back off, and then there's that little screw bit or the little teeth section on the auto adjuster that we'd rotate around until we got to the optimal position, just taking it on and off until it's just at that right level where it's just touching the brake drum itself. So now at this point, let's get cleaned up. We'll put the tire back on, drop it back down, torque everything down to spec, and we'll take it out for a drive and make sure we're working correctly. Okay, now let's jump in. Sorry, it's kind of dark in here. So we're going to start our engine. Okay, so now at this point, we're going to pump our brakes a couple of times, make sure that auto adjuster works, and then we're going to take it for a private drive on our private track, our closed course, and I'll come back in and close up.